Hello. I think we're live now. So, hey, happy Monday to everybody. Hopefully, your week is off to a phenomenal start. It's Mike and Wendy here, and we are inside marriage on a Monday. Um, I don't even know why we chose Monday, to be honest.
Yes. Mondays are a little rough.
It's
And in
rough.
fact, we weren't with you last week because we were coming off of um, a, what's the word? Tenuous? A
Tenuous,
busy weekend
busy
with
weekend. Yeah,
focusing on marriage. And
that's right.
so, because we were all in for 3 days, well, really for the whole week up until last weekend, we decided to take a bye week last week.
Yeah, and I mean, I figure we earned that by week. We were
Hmm.
talking marriage and praying on marriage for much of the weekend. So
Yes.
that was important, but it was a great time. It was a great event. You think?
Yeah, I mean, it always is,
Yeah.
coming together without distractions,
Hmm.
right? So being able to be intentional about spending time with each other for the intense purpose of focusing on marriage.
Yeah. That's right.
Always a good idea.
Always a good idea. And so through that event, there's a lot of things that come out of that. The weekend to remember. They have them in most major markets in the country. Just came back to Augusta last year, and we have the opportunity to really watch people walk through kind of an entire process where they send they began sending our prayer requests about a week before,
Hmm.
and then it and then you're able to see these people kind of come, and they you know they I'm gonna say they present, they emerge, they descend on the hotel, and you're able
Yes.
to actually learn about their story,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
About what's going well, but you learn a lot about the struggle, and some of those people come with the weekend to remember being their last chance,
Yes.
and so.
And really, I mean, strained all the way up until to
Hmm.
making that trip.
Yeah,
So
it's fine.
Uh,
Mhm.
sometimes, and a lot of times they'll say, well, it's the woman's idea and she's dragging the husband to a retreat or an event. And I think that's almost not fair sometimes, but, it happens. And
Yeah,
so then they get there, sometimes not talking to each other all the way, I mean, from leaving home to arriving in that place, and it is their last ditch effort
yeah,
at saving their marriage.
yeah. And there's some people that come and they actually find a way. I say find a way. They hear something or see something that actually moves them, and they walk out of there changed and committed to doing something different.
Yeah.
In fact, we ran into a couple
Yes.
that we spoke with last year,
Hmm.
and they came in having some difficulty. We spent a good number of hours talking to them throughout the conference in 2017,
Oh my goodness.
and even before that was over, though, they stood up and told a crowd of 600 people about how much they appreciated the time that we spent. That was embarrassing.
Yeah, we put in a little overtime with this couple.
Yeah, but
Yeah, but it was good.
it
It
was
was good.
good. And then this year they were back with a
Yes.
baby on the way that's probably due like right now
Right.
as we speak.
Right.
So
She's
that
due
was
in
pretty
2 weeks.
cool.
Rebecca Joe.
I don't know.
I
I'm
mean,
not sure.
I had even claimed that she would likely name her unborn baby girl Wendy, given the
There's still time.
relationship that was fostered at that event. But yeah, as we digress, so that's where we were last week, and that's why we weren't with you. So
Do you want to make a quick introduction so that
yeah, we can. So it was interesting, right? Because we were trying to figure out what we were going to talk about
no,
this
no, I
week.
mean a quick introduction.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
What we're going to talk about this week. And it had been on my heart and on my mind to talk about kids, right? The impact of kids on your marriage, in your marriage, as they grow and as they change. But that's not what we're going to talk about tonight. But before we get into what we're going to talk about, one of our kids, our oldest one, just arrived home. So she drove home, and we're so proud of her because she came home tonight so that she could vote. Hey. This is Sydney. So a lot of you get to see Morgan most of the time. This is Sydney. She's away at school at Agnes Scott.
Sporting a new
You have
hairdo.
something you want to say?
Hello, followers of mine here.
Oh goodness.
Hope you all are having a great night out there.
Oh, okay.
It's a little rainy out here, you know.
Okay, thanks. All right, so thank you. So now it's
Hey
time,
Ashley, what's up, girl?
time to get serious.
Bye.
All right. So, so firstborn, came home so she could vote tomorrow, which is very important. So if you haven't voted yet, make sure that you cast your vote in Georgia. It's the midterm elections tomorrow, but a very important election for governor of Georgia. So we voted already.
Yeah, and of course there's there's Senate races, there's congressional races. I mean, so wherever you are, it's important to vote. I think this year there'll be a record turnout for a midterm election. So you don't want to be the one sitting at home like, yeah, I didn't go, I was tired. Let's go vote. Okay, all right, let's get into it.
Right.
Okay, so, but I think what we're going to talk about tonight, because we just came from this marriage event, and we just see a lot that goes on with people in their relationships. So tonight we thought we might talk about something that we know there are a number of people dealing with, at any given time. And that's when there's been some type of a breach, when there's been some type of a betrayal. And now the decision is what now, what to do.
Yes.
Right.
Good question.
Yeah. What now?
So,
What do you do?
what now? What do you do? So, first, I think is necessary to talk about the different types of things that can happen in a marriage. But let's just get to the things that are most egregious, right? And then we'll talk about our experience. So generally, people decide that their relationship is irreconcilable if there is abuse, right? If there's any form of physical or psychological abuse in the marriage, that's one reason why they may find that they can't come together on the right terms. And there's a question about whether or not you stay in it or whether or not you leave it. So abuse is one. What's another?
I mean, in terms of that brings to that stay or go decision.
Yes. So
I mean,
having different beliefs. So different belief systems sometimes can factor in
Sure.
marriage. And
Sure.
right, what's happening?
Well, you were not. I was centering you because later on you're going to say your arm was cut off.
Okay.
Yeah.
So having different beliefs. So if you have one person that is of one faith or belief or religion and another who is not of the same, that can sometimes cause a divide in the marriage in terms of the decision making, how you raise your children, how you run your home, how you do things together, and really how the marriage itself is defined. And so that's another reason why people may say we just cannot, there's no way for us to resolve this. So you have that.
Yeah, but some of those things are things that going in. A lot of times there'll be differences going in, and we decide, what, our love is bigger than that, and they get into it and they discover, man, this is harder. It's harder than I thought. So did we do the right thing? So, but those are things I can consider those to be kind of those slow burn type things, right? So, I mean, really, let's just go ahead and throw the biggie out there, right? Infidelity, right?
That's a big one.
That's a big one because some people believe that once that is done, once that somebody has crossed that road, then there's no way back, and this thing is over. I can't forgive. I can't get over that. That's what people tend to say. And so, but some people aren't as equivocal, right? Some people are, unequivocal, I should say. But some people, say, what, I'm supposed to be in this thing for the long haul, but they struggle because there's all kind of reasons why they struggle, but they do. Okay.
Right. And I think a lot of the reasons why people struggle is because we have an ideal of what marriage is, right? We have this idea and an ideal, right? And so going into it, we have in our minds, or we picture in our minds, or like we heard recently, we create a movie about what it's supposed to look like and what it's supposed to be. and we form these ideas based on what we've seen, what other people tell us, what we see in movies, and then just our own personal desires. So, hey,
Hey.
Tanya and Lakeish and Ashley, we already gave you a shout out.
Yes.
So it's all of this stuff. So this fairy tale image that I have in mind, and even if it's not a true fairy tale, it is my idea of what the perfect marriage is. And then when it turns out to not be that, we sometimes have difficulty existing in the relationship that we actually have. And so our decisions when something goes wrong, and in this case, when there's infidelity, when something goes wrong, our decisions are based on what we've seen other people do, what we've been told or raised to believe we should do. And then really just, I mean, sometimes it's just our emotions.
Yeah, it is, a lot of people take it to, what this says about me, that is that it happened, or what does it say about me if I stay, right? Because people take it even beyond, how am I going to feel? They take it to, well, what are people going to say? How's this going to look?
Right.
Then in the meantime, you have people in your ear also, saying, hey, this is what you need to do. If they know, right? This is what you need to do. I wouldn't do this and X, Y, Z. So there's so many things swirling around about what to do after something like that happens.
Right. And it's interesting because I was having a conversation recently where, hi, Daniel, glad you could join us.
Hey.
A conversation recently where it was the woman who stepped out in the marriage that was unfaithful or had an affair. And it seemed that the person that I was having a discussion with was saying that there's a trend, right? That's kind of what's happening right now, that women are being a little bit more bold or doing that, the roles are changing, so to speak, which I thought was interesting because I don't know if that is true exactly, if the roles are actually changing or if we're just being a little bit more verbal about what's happening, right? So you said something that was very important. If people know. And so in a lot of relationships, people will say, hey, keep everything that happens in your marriage, right? Don't talk to anybody else. Don't talk about if there are problems or if you fight a lot, because there's all these external forces or factors that are trying to infiltrate your marriage. And so what can happen with that is that you're isolated. And so it's we want to be clear on keeping what's inside your marriage, but at the same time, not being isolated from anyone else who may be able to also impart good things into your marriage. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no doubt. Hey, Sharonda. Hey, Jeff. Welcome. All right. So I think it's important to keep things inside your marriage, right? To keep it really about you and your marriage. And having said that, there are moments when you need a lifeline, right? When you are absolutely drowning and you need somebody. And so then the question becomes who that somebody is, which I think maybe we even talk about that a little bit later, but there needs to be someone who is all 100% about you and your spouse and your marriage, and the way that they think about marriage needs to be consistent. Hopefully with what you think about marriage in terms of it being a till death do us part type thing. So you're getting till death do us part type guidance.
Right. Covenant, right? Someone who shares the same beliefs, right? And so our belief, we're Christians, so we believe, and what we share is what God's plan is for marriage, right? And when we talk about that, that's how we try to live it. And so the people that are then influencing you within your marriage relationship need to be of the same or similar belief. It needs to be consistent. And you have to be careful with this because it can't just be somebody who's going to be on your side.
Yeah. Because
if it's just going to be somebody who's going to be on your side, they're going to agree with you and they're going to say, whatever you say, they're going to say, yes, do that. And here's why. Or, and some other guidance is married people should not have single friends. What do you think about that?
I mean, I've heard that. I get where that comes from. I'm trying to think do I have any single friends? I don't even know if I have single friends. I don't know. I can't think of any off the top of my head. But the spirit of that guidance is I mean, I think it's true. And in terms of the ideal, and what you share, what you do, because when we moved here, actually back in 2011 is when I started working at Fort Jackson. Went to a class, and the instructor of the class, we were kind of talking or whatever. After he was like, "Man, you ever like kick it in Columbia or whatever?" I'm like, "Dude, no, I don't kick it nowhere. I kick it at home with my wife and kids. That's where I kick it. I mean, find your wife and some kids or something. I mean, so to me, it's not even a question of whether you should have single friends. It's more, I have very little interest that are single individual interests, right? Unless you're trying to come and hang out with the family, you can hang out with the family, I suppose. And we can talk about relationships and life and whatnot. But yeah, but in terms of where I get my guidance and things like that, where I get, mentoring, whatever it might be, there's nobody that's single that's telling me about marriage right now. Right? I mean, actually there's one exception, but given what he does, what he says is sound, but I think that you have to really recognize where you're getting your information from, and what that's about. Because if somebody is pushing you toward relationship, or they're pushing you toward the word, in our case, then they're giving you good stuff, right?
Yeah.
But anything that's talking about division, not so much. And that's really, and there are some exceptions to even that.
Right.
That I don't think we're getting into deeply tonight.
Yeah.
But there are some times when you probably do need to go, right? Because because there are people who are being beaten right now.
Yes.
There's no question about whether or not you should get out of that.
Right. And it's because it can escalate very quickly, and it goes from maybe minimal or benign abuse. It starts out psychological, it progresses to physical, and then it can become deadly. That's generally how it's taught and what we talk about. But the truth is, it can go very quickly from being emotional abuse to deadly.
Yeah.
And so if you have the sense that you are in an abusive relationship, or you think that you are, you feel like you are, or that person is not honoring you or loving you in the way that they committed to, then you need to ask some questions.
Yeah. And the question is that I'll ask you is, okay, so if you believe somebody isn't, let's say if they're verbally not supportive or even verbally abusive versus physically.
Yes.
Is it, because I believe without question, physically, if it's physical, you probably need to go. Right. Do you pray your way through the verbal thing, or how do you manage that?
Right. And that's where seeking advice and counsel from someone other than you, because sometimes when you're in it, it's difficult to see it, right? And so the people that you know and that are in your life that truly love you and have your best interest at hand, if they're telling you that they see some red flags or they notice some differences, then you might want to try to pan out a little bit to get more, to dig a little deeper and really look at your situation, right? Because when you're in it and you're close to it, like I said, you sometimes can't see it.
Yeah.
And so if you're in a situation where someone is being emotionally or verbally abusive, then yes, I would always recommend that you seek counseling of some sort. Whether that's individual or marital counseling, seeing a counselor invites someone who is completely objective, has no stake in the game, to be able to look and see things in a way that neither of the two of you can.
Yeah, and that gets to Daniel's question. He asked about whether or not you saw that about you should, if it's good to get advice or counseling from someone who doesn't know you, and I would say because when people know you, then they form biases, or they may often take a side or what have you, or so you need someone who is not so close to your situation that they get clouded as well, right? Because they know you and they see you hurting, for example, then that can kind of bias what you see. Right. And so it's important if you're going to seek counseling or advice, it's important to know where that person is coming from, that it's fundamentally, morally, et cetera, where they're coming from, how do they view marriage in particular. Specifically,
right. And what their experience is, right? And so you cannot be afraid to do the research on that. You want to have someone who is a professional, someone who knows what they're doing, has done this before, and may be familiar with the issue or the thing that you're going through. Not just marriage in general, but your issue. And so when you're researching or looking to find someone, it's important to find someone that you're both compatible with, if that's possible.
Yeah.
But sometimes you're so close to it, and there's so much hurt, and there's so much anger, and there's so much pain, and there's so much resentment that you can't even make it to the table to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in a situation like that, if you believe that your life is in danger, or that that it could escalate to becoming physical violence,
Mm-hmm.
then you actually need to take action and reach out. And there
Mm-hmm.
are a number of resources available.
Good. Are you gonna? I mean,
Yeah.
do you want to? Before we're done,
Mm-hmm.
do you just want to put some of those in the feed?
Yeah, we can. We
Okay.
can list some. In fact, I'll be doing a talk. Victory over violence is one of the. If you just Google victory over violence, you'll see a number of resources that come up here in Augusta. Safe Homes Augusta is a shelter for women and children. There are a number of shelters, but we'll put some of that information up before we leave. And so as we get into that, I mean, that we're kind of going down a rabbit hole in a direction that we're not really familiar. Thank God. That is not a reality within our relationship. But I can tell you that we're always constantly looking at even how we communicate. And so after close to 21 years, how we communicate with each other, what messages we're sending, do we understand each other, constantly kind of, putting our finger on the pulse on that. That's a daily thing.
No, continue. Are we going down another rabbit hole? Or
No,
are you
we're
coming?
not. I'm
Okay.
just saying, because it's a daily thing. And I think when you're talking about how communication kind of gets off course, and in terms of if people are being verbally abusive, arguments don't necessarily equate to abuse.
No, arguments don't at all. I mean, it's about the content of what you say,
Right.
that equates to abuse. But okay, but we're talking about stay or go,
Right.
right? And so let's.
How do you make the decision, or I don't know if you. How you make the decision?
How did you make the decision?
All right. So inside our marriage, we're back. So what we are familiar with and what we did experience was infidelity in our marriage. And and what we're talking about tonight, it was not me. Not that I'm like, it wasn't me. It just wasn't. It wasn't me.
Well, you were like just literally like it wasn't me.
I know. So Mike stepped out.
Oh goodness.
And the way that came about, it was a very pivotal time, and we were not unique in any way, right? But the challenge for it was that I was completely blindsided by it. So here I had put in so much work and effort to being a good wife, a good mother, a good nurse, good at my job, trying to juggle everything and do it all really well. And that was my sole focus. And I thought everything was going well, right? And so we started out with a fairy tale romance that escalated into a fairy tale family romance. And then as we added children and added dogs, our family grew. And those people and those things, although we didn't recognize it, began to compete for our attention, right? And not just our attentions, but our affection. And so as you continue to go through life, and we plan to talk about those things, because I really wanted to talk about kids, because kids, oh my goodness, kids make it a challenge in marriage. But again, as I digress. So there we were at about 6 3/4 of the way into our marriage. Everything had gone almost perfectly up to that point. Mm-hmm. And you guys, if you've been joining us from the beginning, you already know how we met and how it started out. And so, it was an interesting thing, right? So here we are. We had just moved to a new city. We had just, closed on our house, and everything seemed to be going fine. Although I could sense that something wasn't completely right? And so, you could call it intuition, you can call it just a sense, but something just didn't feel right. And it hadn't felt right for a while. And so we had that conversation. And so you want to get into all of the details of it? It would take us like two
No, we
hours.
can't get into all of these. I
Yeah.
don't think. I mean, I just say on the front end that you have to be very careful, um, fellas, or anybody really, to guard your heart, to guard your eyes, your mind, your everything. And oftentimes, the most dangerous situations are people that you already know. And so, it's important that if you're feeling some kind of way, anything but completely happy and satisfied and content, that you continue to talk about communication, continue to have dialogue and talk and kind of work through and get over yourself to some degree, and understand what and for in my case, what the Bible is telling you about being the kind of husband that you need to be,
Mm.
right? And so, because if you don't do that, then you begin to potentially kind of drift away from the things that keep you connected in the first place, or that should, right?
Right, right.
And so, long story short, when he gets the news, and I thought when I gave her that news that day, I was pretty certain that it was over. I was pretty certain it was going to be a wrap. I just didn't know how it was going to crumble, but I figured that's it, done, right?
Yeah.
And so I actually did call somebody that day. I called my father
Mm.
because I trust my father completely. I know what he's about, and he loved Wendy. He loved me, and all he wanted to see was that relationship last, right? And so I called him, and he'd been through very similar things. So I gave him a call, and that's what I did. So.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, it was a challenge, right? Because in that instance, it wasn't just that I felt betrayed, it was that I didn't know what I could trust. Everything that I had put my trust in seemed to have evaporated like instantly. And so when I say I was blindsided, it wasn't, it was so is our whole marriage a lie? Is our life a lie? And have I been lying to myself? And so all of these questions just spiraling. I mean, it was insane. I really, I mean, it would take me all night to get into that part of it. But one of the things that I understood, or I had to come to a place of understanding, was as much as I could question what I did or failed to do, because that's the place that I was immediately in, which is not unlike most people on either side, man or woman. What was it? What was I failing at? What was it that I didn't do? I eventually grew to a point where I understood that it had really probably nothing to do with me and everything to do with him. And my disappointment in that situation was that he was not the man that I thought he was. At least that was my biggest hurt. That was the thing that hurt me the most, right? Because I trusted him completely. I put everything, my whole life, in his hands. How could the person that I love the most hurt me in this way? And so that's where I was immediately. However, my first thought was, yes, this will end right now, and it will end quickly, and it will end right here as we drive down the highway, and it will end for both of us. That was my first thought.
Read between the lines, y'all. I never heard it communicated in quite that way.
Yeah, well,
But
that's what
yeah.
it was. And then once I got past that, I was like, no, 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 because I do love my girls, and because I need to know more, and because I had questions, it was just pull over. Stop the car now, pull over now, so that we can talk about this. And so then it went from there. But I can tell you, and we're pretty open about this. We've shared this story a few times. There were many days, and there was a lot of pain. I mean, there were many days of questions and questioning myself. And if I didn't leave him, that would be going against everything that I had been told, taught, and seen my entire life. And I had every right to leave him. And so then it's, well, am I being weak if I don't? And, and people who say once a dog, always a dog. And if somebody cheats, then they're going to cheat again. And, all of that stuff. Right. And so it's a good question, Michelle, that you asked, because it wasn't overnight. It wasn't just because I got to a point where I could forgive him or I could move on. The trust was not immediate. And we stood at the bottom of the staircase, and this was maybe the next day or a few days after, of some silence, some really angry eyes.
Rage.
I mean, it was bad.
Yeah.
And I remember looking at him, and I said to him, "Look at my face." Because up until that point, and you guys know me, right? I smile all the time. But up until that point, I had smiled and I had pure joy. And it was because I had full trust and confidence in what we had. And that was gone. And it was reflected. And I was like, look at me. And whatever you see on my face is what you put there, is basically what I told him. But then the other part of that was that I did forgive him. And I was at a place where my relationship with God was strong enough for me to be able to exercise forgiveness and really know what that meant, right? And so I knew that if I made a decision to forgive him, that I would have to forgive him and not revisit, forgive him and not continue to question, forgive him and not now tippy-toe around whether or not I could trust him, or if I need to check his phone every 5 minutes, or every time he wasn't where he said he was supposed to be, that I would go reeling back to this moment in time. So my forgiveness had to be forgiveness unequivocal and forgiveness final. And so what I said to Mike was, you just better be thankful that I love God more than I love you.
Quote unquote hallway.
Yeah, it was
1702. I mean, that's what that
you
was.
can't put the address out.
Oh, I mean, we don't live there now.
I know, but still. So that's what
That's
happened with us. And I remember that it was not of my own strength in that moment, because I had some not so flattering moments during that week. Some really, I mean, it was horrible. It was just horrible. I mean, I don't think anything in my life that had occurred up to that point was as hurtful or devastating to me as that. And the question that I had was, how do you move on from that? And, like you said, how do you learn to trust after that? And so for me, and I guess for you too, it was uncharted territory, because I had never seen it done. It had never been modeled for me. Yeah. And that's because people don't always talk about it, right? And so if it had happened in somebody else's marriage, I was not aware. But in the marriages where I did know what happened and they ended, then for me the answer was clear, that there was no way back from that. Yeah. So it took a lot of time, patience, prayer, a whole lot of prayer, and really reflecting on, what I wanted, what I believed, and what had changed.
Yeah.
What?
I'm listening.
Oh, okay.
Intently. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so how do we get past that, and how did I decide whether or not I would stay or leave? Well, it wasn't instant. I didn't decide in the moment. I think allowing some time and allowing time to gain some clarity was helpful, right? Because if you if you make a snap decision in the midst of the emotion, I think that you almost will always regret the decision that you made. It doesn't mean that you'll make the wrong decision, but there just may be some regret, right? Because you want to make sure you make a decision where you have all of the information, or at least as much information as is available, right?
Well, I'm going to pause you there, right? Because I don't think you had all the information. I think that what you had was that initial decision to forgive.
Yes.
Now, forgiving was clear to me that it wasn't, because she told me that she was going to, it was like early, I don't remember what day, but she said it like, I forgive you. And so I didn't go like cheering, like, yeah, woo, in the clear, because I knew the road back from where we were. Remember, we're talking paradise, Camelot, pick your term.
Yeah.
It was better than you could imagine. Straight up. It was. And then it wasn't. And I recognized, I thought that at first, okay, this is over. And then it was like, okay, well, maybe it's not over, but this is going to be different. It's like I was Superman, Steve Thompson, right? And that S was ripped right off my chest. And so, but Wendy made a decision to forgive. And she said, she had maybe an unflattering week or what have you. And so it's very easy to get caught up in this cycle of watching each other and checking emails and, just sweating every single little thing, because now it's ironic that like, you like say I'm the one who wrecked it, but now I'm like insecure and I'm afraid of what's going to happen but I had to come to the decision that, I accept and own what happened, what I did, and then be still long enough for her to find me. And when I say be still long enough, that is, understand what the impact was, and then do the things that are required to rebuild, no matter what that looked like. Be consistent, be where you're supposed to be, call and check in, do all those things that, people will tend to say, man, I'm grown, I don't have to. No, you got to recognize the impact of what has happened and act accordingly. And in fact, there are a lot of things I learned about myself that Wendy just was like, she was okay with, but I still changed. So I'm like, you know what, if I'm going to be the person I'm supposed to be, there's just a lot I got to do. I got to understand what it really means to love your wife as Christ loved the church. And because if I really took that in, then maybe I go about like the previous year or two or whatever, maybe I go about that a little bit differently. And I handle her a little differently. I speak to her a little differently. I handle issues a little differently if I really take that in. And so I had to really begin to understand what that means. And to me, what that means is being in a state of forgiveness. And that doesn't mean that your jaws ain't gonna be tight sometimes, but what it does mean is that you are in this constant state of sacrifice and forgiveness and understanding and all that. I don't get that perfect now all the time, but I really I did not get that. I didn't do that well at all at that point. And so, but the crazy part is that through all that, I don't believe that we slept in a different bed once through all that.
No, we didn't. We didn't go to separate rooms. We had a guest bedroom. We didn't go to separate rooms. We didn't sleep in a different bed. We didn't take a breather and separate until we could sort it out. We mutually made a decision to be where we were, right? And recognize that it required some work and repair from both of us. And some research, and we got to a place of really recognizing that our marriage was our mutually created reality, right? It wasn't what other people told us it wasn't what we had heard it should be. It was what we mutually created together. So whatever occurred in it was because we both either allowed it to occur, wanted it to occur, or were a part of it occurring. And so it really took the process of deconstructing it to really be able to construct it in a way that would fortify it and would get us past the things that would be to come in the coming years. Because just because you get past one thing doesn't mean that there won't be something else that also comes to challenge you. And so, in that situation, while it's difficult to, and what I didn't want to be close to him. I didn't want to, have physical contact. I didn't want to be in the same space, but I also didn't want to be away from him. And, the truth was just like, when you hang up the phone on somebody, or you used to hang up the phone on somebody, or when you're mad at somebody, it's always like, man, what am I losing out on by kind of holding him hostage, right? Or saying, hey, don't touch me. If I am so focused on him not touching me, then I'm the one that's actually not being loved and cherished and touched. So you kind of have to be very clear about what it is if you're going to establish some sanctions, or you're going to, say that you're going to separate, or you're going to go to different rooms. For what purpose is what you need to ask yourself. What are you hoping to accomplish by doing that? And so, again, we understand sometimes you're so enraged, you're so angry, it's just safe and better for everybody that you're not close. We get that. But if you can get beyond that, then what we would recommend, I think we would both say, do everything that you can to not separate, or go to separate corners.
Because people they say they want time and space, right?
Yeah.
But time and space create opportunity, and it can even just be the opportunity that swirls around in your head. I don't have to deal with this, I don't need this, I don't want this, etc. There's something about being together, and even when it's difficult, and a lot of people will try to escape that discomfort. It is uncomfortable sometimes, deciding to crawl into that bed with the person that is like really could like choke you out. I'm talking Wendy, she could have choked anyway. But it is so necessary. And we tell people all the time, even if you could touch, even if it's just taking your feet and doing that, there's something about that keeps out other things, especially now, because this bad boy here, right? It used to be you just go to your room and you just pout all night, but that's not what people are doing now. Now they're reaching out. And so what do you want in that space? You probably don't want, what's possible, you probably don't want, right? And so if you can keep it really about trying to heal and work through the hard parts. Because even for me, I think it's important to, guilt can really erode your sense of who you are.
Yeah.
And it can get you thinking, I've wrecked it, it's over, it's all my fault, it's all my fault, it's all my fault. Once she said she forgave me, it was important for me to become the man that I needed to be, because it's counterintuitive, but what she didn't need at that time was somebody who was moping around all the time. We had to get on about the business of now rebuilding something. We didn't know what it was going to look like. All we knew was what ideal looked like as we saw it. We had to be about the business of rebuilding this relationship brick by brick. And so it required that I kind of stand up and be confident, not to the point where, because you have to remember, you don't get a total pass. You don't get to race away from everything. You got to remember places, times on the calendar. There's certain things that are going to be triggering for a while.
Yes, years.
And you have to be, because each year it got better and better and better.
Yeah.
Right.
But that is true. Each year it got better. But there were things and reminders. So those triggers or those reminders, it would be things that you wouldn't even think about. A song, a movie, something that somebody says, somebody else going through the same thing and wanting to talk to you about it.
Movies.
Those are things that I said movies.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, those are things that can snatch you right back to your reality in that moment. And your memory of what happened, your emotion, everything, it comes back, and it comes back quick. And if you're not careful, you will relive it all, and you will add in your own nuances and narrative, right? And so one of the things that you said that I thought was really important is if you separate, what you have then is time to yourself. And when you have time to yourself and you are ruminating or just kind of playing over and over your own thoughts, you can change the narrative, right? And you can change, what you did in it and who's at fault and how you see it, because the only input you have is your own. And so that can be a very dangerous place to be unless you're going away for a short time. And for that time, what you're doing is praying and seeking God in terms of guidance on what you should do and who you should be as a person. But like I said, if at all possible, don't separate. Now, if there is no way around it and you can't see that what you have is better than what you believe you lost, then you have some soul searching to do. You absolutely should talk to someone. You absolutely should go to counseling when you make the decision that it is worth saving. And our belief is that if it was worth doing in the first place, then it's worth saving. But if once you make a decision that it's worth saving, then you have to begin the work quickly to save it.
Yep. And hey Andrea, welcome. Hey Steve. Steve's on a roll over here. But he mentioned don't forget shame, guilt and shame.
Yeah.
They destroy you, from my perspective, very, very damaging and destructive. And so I think the first thing important to remember is that everybody, the word says all have sinned and fallen short.
Yeah.
Right. There's a lot of people out there that have done some real insidious, jacked up stuff that we don't know about. And some of them will come off with the, I've never done anything type thing they give you sometimes, like, yeah, well, I've never done that thing.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. But is that true? Right. And so
nobody knows.
Right. Once you begin to recognize that all of us have done some things that we can be profoundly ashamed of, then it helps to humanize you. Now you have to deal with this woman that you've hurt. Right. And so once you're humanized, you can't get so humanized that you erase off and forget. Like there are gonna be some setbacks, and there are gonna be some times where you just went in to watch a movie and all of a sudden it became really real quick. And so that's when you begin to, I talked about guarding your heart and your mind. Well, that's when you begin to guard the relationship as well. Everything that goes in has to be about building us up. It has to be about togetherness and everything. Negativity, no place for that. Anybody who would speak to, to have you separate, break up or whatever, no place for that. And so we really, we got involved in ministry, and we got involved in ministry together, and, just being together. And so I think the reason Wendy didn't leave is because she loved me enough, and she was spiritually mature enough to go through what I would say was a good deal of pain in order to get to some other place that she couldn't see. And frankly, that neither one of us knew what was going to happen after that.
Right.
Yeah.
And I also had to recognize that my trust was misplaced. Mm-hmm. Right. And so, the word tells us that if you trust in man, that they're going to disappoint you. Mm-hmm. Right. They're going to fall short because no man is perfect. Mm-hmm. But if we put so much in the people around us and so much on them, and we put them on a pedestal as if they cannot make a mistake or they will never do anything wrong, including things to us, then we are essentially setting ourselves up for disappointment, right? And so betrayal comes about when your trust is not in the right place. So what do I mean by that? Well,
that's good.
If my trust had been in, knowing that, God was faithful, that, our marriage could be everything that he wanted it to be, and we were both together mutually seeking that thing, right? And we were talking about it, and it became our focus. Then we were both there together, and that's what we were working towards. But my trust was in him. And while that's not really a mistake, I don't advise that now. Now I know better. And so when you're very young, it's all, everything is everything. You're happy, it feels good, and it feels like you're going to stay in that place forever. But as you age and as things change, whether that's adding children or jobs or whatever it is, it's inevitable that you're going to come upon something that's going to cause conflict, difference of opinion,
Mhm.
challenges, pressure, or stress on your marriage. And it is necessary to fortify the relationship and fortify your marriage, not just with each other, but your marriage in covenant with the Lord, so that you are able to then withstand those things that come.
Yeah. And I was talking to my sisters about this earlier. All that is based in something simple as a decision,
Mhm.
right? I've decided that you are the one, period, right? It's in our vows, right? Better, worse, richer, poor, all that. And so once you've made that decision, well, that part of the struggle is over. But for people who have not decided, you are it for me, period.
Mm-hmm.
For people who have kind of an exit strategy, well, that becomes a different thing to work your way through, because now you're not thinking about putting the energy into keeping us together. You're putting the energy into the exit strategy.
Right.
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 And so,
and so that's the thing, right? You can't be selfish in marriage. You shouldn't be, and expect it to thrive.
Mhm.
So if you're in marriage for you, yeah, you're in it for the wrong reason. I mean, you don't have to be in a relationship, certainly not a lifelong relationship, is if everything is about what you get out of it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Right?
Right. I get a lot of it. I get a lot out of it. I put a lot in. But hey, so the rest of the story is this. Because if you decide that it's not worth it to try, first of all, I think that I need to be careful about how I say this, but to expect, it's kind of like when people will jump from one thing to the next. Like, hey, the next thing, it'll be better.
Mm.
The problem is when you show up at the next thing, there's a human being waiting for you there.
Yeah.
And so if you're able to forgive, and if you're able to commit to being who you're supposed to be in that marriage, it can actually be better than it was.
That's true.
I mean, so we thought that we kind of had hit the mountaintop, the pinnacle, right? And then all this happens, and we begin the years-long journey of working our way back. And one day I look up, and literally my Superman emblem had been stripped from me. And
by his own hands.
Well, yeah, but yeah, Wendy was like, "Yeah, you ain't Superman. You just a regular dude," and that cut deep. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but you all get my point.
I didn't say that.
She kind of said that. But then one day, when I least expected it, it was I think it was Christmas actually, when you gave me, it was a key ring, right? A Superman key ring.
Yeah.
Which was a small little indicator, like you might be coming back. Then there was the Superman T-shirt and the hoodie and the sweatshirt, and next thing you know, I'm like swimming in Superman gear. The point was how she saw me, how she felt about me, how she felt about us. We were getting to another place, and that was after all of this, right? Because of consistency, because of prayer, because of transformation, all of a sudden, and it felt like all of a sudden, but it was years in the making, we had an entirely different relationship. The core of it was that love that we always had. It was the same. That attraction, it was the same. But there was something around our relationship that was completely different and stronger and stable and certain about that. And so, then we, one day we look up and we lead the married couples ministry at church. And then it's leading the local team for this Weekend to Remember thing last year. And then, 600 people there. And then like this year, 500 plus people or whatever registered for the event this year. And we're involved in that from a place of strength, not uncertainty, no questions about our relationship and who we are and what we are. And that's just a miracle, actually. It's a miracle that it happened in that way. But it's not a miracle that can only happen to us. I think that miracle occurred because of some decisions that we made, that we stuck by, and and we chose to focus on God and not so much on what you're doing, what you're not doing, but we focus on God and use that kind of as a basis for how we did our relationship, and it just made all the difference, and it continues to make the difference.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, we often talk about the illustration of the closer that you move to God, the closer you move together,
Mhm.
and that is really true, and it is an individual journey in doing that. But let me say that when you are in a marriage with someone who is not in the same place that you are, who um, is doesn't see things exactly the same way that you do, and who maybe you know doesn't fully understand or grasp or own or take responsibility for what they've done or do in your relationship, it can be very difficult to heal and repair and move forward. You really have to sometimes return back to the start line before you can go forward. And so, you know, one of the things that when I have conversations with people and they say, you know, when you talk about it, it seems so easy. It's like you just said you made a decision and it was done. And the truth is that that's not real. You don't, you can, and I'm not saying that it's impossible. I'm just saying that that's not what happened with us.
Mhm.
That it does require a lot of work. Marriage requires a lot of work and effort. But, you know, back to once you make the decision that you're in it and you're in it together and you're in it for life, then what you're saying is I'm up to the challenge. I am up to doing whatever it takes so that we can mutually benefit, that we're both getting something from it, that we are both happy in it. Not just I'm going to stick this out so that the children cannot have to deal with divorce.
Yeah.
Not a good reason to stay in it. I'm gonna stick this out because I don't want people to think I failed. Not a good reason. Cannot be the reason that you decide to stay together. I'm gonna stick this out because as a Christian, I've been raised and taught that you don't divorce and you don't leave marriage. Not a good reason to stay in an unhealthy marriage.
Right.
It's just not. And so while we, you know, counsel people and we work with people and we talk all the time about how you can fix things and reconcile and seek God and do different things within your marriage, there is a point where you have to recognize when you've exhausted everything that maybe the two of you could do together. And sometimes the answer is that you should go.
No. So I don't know. I mean, because I think that because Steve said marriages don't fail or succeed on their own. It's choices that drive results, right? Choosing this is forever, right? Because people who quit stuff are often people who give themselves that out. They are there, you know, if you're gonna run a marathon, they're like, well, you know, if I make it, you know, 10 miles, I mean that's more than I ran, right?
Yeah.
Somebody with a mindset set like that will likely quit because that race, it gets a lot more difficult before it gets easy, before you see the finish line and the goal. And so for people who make weak choices, like, or choices that are conditional, it's even more difficult to stay, easier to go. And so, but if you close the door behind you and lock it, figuratively speaking, like, hey, you know what, we're in this together and let's go. And so it completely changes how you navigate through problems. I'm going to say that if you decided to marry somebody, you decided that for a reason.
Yeah.
And so we talked about some of the reasons why you go earlier. I'm of the mindset that if we are willing to forgive, to walk in forgiveness, and to sacrifice, those are the things that will often cause problems because there's something that we're not willing. every issue. If I think about every issue I've ever had,
Wait, say that again.
they're not willing to forgive,
Oh, not willing to
not
forgive.
willing to forgive, and not
Okay.
willing to sacrifice.
Okay, gotcha.
And or some people that's two.
Yeah.
But if forgiveness and sacrifice aren't the things that lead you,
Mm-hmm.
problems. Like very
Yes.
difficult to navigate that.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be the simplest things. Sacrifice. We have 2 dogs, y'all. You know how many I want? 0.
So,
But
yeah.
anyway, but I ain't. No, I'm not getting when he started on that. I'm just saying that's sacrifice. Shoot, this
Yes.
morning at 6 o'clock in the morning with Ruby. Sacrifice.
Okay, so
Anyway,
but before we leave, what we're talking about,
Yeah.
right? So the other thing that I think is important to know
Mhm.
is that I don't carry his guilt, and I don't remind him of it,
Mm.
and I haven't, and so it's
That's
not
true.
something that as time has gone on, if something happens, I'm not looking at him and saying, you know what you did,
Mhm.
or leaving little notes or being mean for no reason. If I'm having an issue or something triggers something or I'm remembering something, then we have to talk about it and kind of talk through it. But I'm not going to just walk around rolling my eyes and having an attitude and being mean without explaining why. And so I think it's important that it's not about forgive and forget and you just move on as if nothing happened. We actually recognize and appreciate that what happened actually did serve a purpose of fortifying the marriage that we have today.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important to say because I think a lot of times people, get in this place of, well, if you hadn't done that, if you didn't do this, we
Mhm.
wouldn't be in this situation. And I'm going to blame you and I'm going to remind you until I die because you did this to me.
Mhm.
You cannot have a healthy marriage, that a healthy, lasting, loving marriage, if that is the way that you carry it out, right? So forgiveness is the key, but also communicating that forgiveness and living in a loving way are the things that kind of help you continue to grow together, because both of you are going to grow and change over time. But I think it's not helpful to continually bring up something that happened. You don't like it, they don't like it either. So, I mean, and that's everything. That's anything, right? What happened yesterday ended yesterday. We heard that. It ended yesterday. So we have today and moving forward that we can be focused on. And you should always be focused forward.
Mhm.
So where do we go from here, right?
Mhm.
How great can this be? Now we have opportunity. And guess what? We get to mutually define it.
Yeah, that's it. Steve said, "Forgiveness is about restoration, not reminding." Oh, he preaching now. We gonna quote.
Yeah.
Can we quote that? We gonna quote that.
Yeah,
So
yeah. But it can't be, well, I'm gonna forgive and I'm just gonna move on and I'm good. Yeah, I mean, you have to really live that thing out,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so we are just thankful. I'm thankful to be at a point where now I can commit time to sharing with other people and talking about how we did it, but it's not so much what we did,
Mhm.
but that there's hope in it, right? That there is hope beyond betrayal. There is hope beyond pain. There is hope beyond hurt. And that even when your perfect marriage, which is a misnomer in the first place, but even when your perfect marriage crumbles, that there is hope that it can be rebuilt.
Mhm.
And sometimes better than it was when you started.
Yep. And so, what makes art like art and valuable is that it's not perfect, right? It is. There's something about. Did you might have taught me that. I don't know. So, but there's something about it. Like, you know what? I can tell this piece is unique, right? And so the flaw makes it not imperfect. It makes it unique, and it makes it valuable. And so, I think that Wendy is right, where the constant reminding and kind of going backwards not helpful. But there is hope, and that's what I think we need to leave you all with today, is that no matter what it is, there's actually hope. It's possible. It just requires that at least one of you stand still and try to walk and live and be the way that you promised that you would walk, live, and be. And it's hard to do.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't have to do it, and it's not fair and all that. But if you can do it, it can transform your relationship and make it better than it ever was. Believe it or not, possible.
Yeah, absolutely possible. We did it.
Yeah. So are you? I'm looking at your face like, do I believe her? It's like, does the internet believe you?
Yeah, I mean, but hey, yes. It is possible. It is possible. And, not everybody is at a point where they can, go live and give a testimony.
Yeah.
But that is our prayer, that you are able to heal to a point that you use your pain and your experience to be able to be a witness and help others heal.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not about keeping it to yourself. And one of the things that I focused on this year was that he didn't heal me to hide. And when I took that to heart, it really was about the fact that when God does something amazing in your life, it's not for you to keep it to yourself.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that, because that's the last one I was trying to work myself too. Mm-hmm. Shame will also cause you to hide the details, hide what happened or whatever. And so people who are struggling, when you are struggling, and if you have struggled, and I know everybody watching this has, it feels like everybody else is just doing so well. It feels like, you're the only one that goes through this. You're the only ones who argue rolling up to the door and getting out of this place. You're the only ones who go home and argue all night long and don't sleep. You get to work. You're the only one who's just tired because you argued all night. And so shame causes us to hide. So people look at us, they see the face that we create. They see the situations that we create, not the real situation. And so getting to a point, and you can't do this prematurely, but you'll know. Wendy and I don't even know how we knew at the same time that it was time to share that experience, but we just knew. Getting to that point gives hope to other people, if you can ever get there. Because if you're doing okay, it's often important for people to know that maybe you haven't been always doing okay, and yet you can survive and have a phenomenal relationship.
Yes, you can. So we know we kind of came in kind of heavy this week, and but the truth is, it's not always fun and games. Sometimes there's some very serious things that occur, and our intent is, to share with the hope that we can help someone else heal. Mm-hmm. So we appreciate you all spending a little time with us on a Monday, no less. And
we are long-winded today.
Yeah, right. Joining us for a look inside marriage again. And so now we're gonna grab up the two people that we've been blessed with, the other two people, and get something to eat.
All right, we're gonna eat, and
then we're probably gonna watch some Monday Night Football.
And then we got Netflix, so we're gonna binge watch a little too. Yeah, Netflix. Okay.
So that's what's happening down here with the Perrys. Thank you guys for joining us. Please keep your comments coming. Invite others to join us on Mondays at 7. Share this post. Send us your questions if you have some. And, let us know what you want to talk about.
Absolutely share this, though, because I think there's some people that really need to see this right now. Yeah. So absolutely share this, okay?
Yeah. And we'll add in the comments, we'll put in there information about where to go if you find yourself in a domestic violence situation, because it is very serious. And we want to make sure that if you're in that situation, that you at least have an idea of what resources are available. And by all means, you can always inbox us for more information or questions.
Okay. All right.
Do you do counseling?
Do I do counseling? Mm-hmm. Who wants to know?
Just a question.
I can't tell the world that. Just DM us and ask that question. But yeah. Yes. So
love you too, Lakeish. Glad y'all could join us. I know you're busy. And everybody that was on tonight, thank you for joining us. And we'll be back. If you happen to catch us on our Catalyst page, we'll be back with the last word on Thursday. But if this is where you're catching us on Mondays at 7, we'll see you next week at 7 on Monday.
That's it.
All right, that's it.
Take care.
Bye. Good job.